both black.
Not.
We're exactly the same, but there's little things like we eat rice and peas, they eat jollof rice, we have fried dumpling.
No, that's not a comparison.
That's the difference.
No, I'm saying if you're gonna have two comparisons, it would be rice and peas and wache. You wouldn't compare
Okay.
jollof rice and...
They eat wache, we eat rice and peas.
Yeah.
We have lemon and ginger, you have house of cocoa.
Welcome back to our channel. We're here to give you another video today. So this is Levi and Stephanie here with you again, and today's topic is social and cultural differences in marriage. Just some background on how this topic even came about. We were at a marriage retreat in our first year of marriage with your old church. And this was one of the topics. So they had like little breakout sessions. And one of the topics that was taken by a couple was based on social and cultural differences. And they were from two different countries. I think one was
from Antigua and one was from Dominica / Jamaica.
Yeah, so both Caribbean but different islands.
Yeah, you might say all Caribbeans are the same, but
they're not.
Yeah,
and they had different backgrounds. One came from a Christian home, one came from a home that wasn't religious. There were various different differences, and so we were kind of looking at what our differences were. There are very many similarities that we have, but actually our cultural differences are quite significant, aren't they? And I just want to point out that I've painted my other... For those of you that watched the last video where my husband exposed my hands, come and see. Come and see painted nails.
Yeah, so
yeah.
I think we think this is important because a lot of people don't really flesh that out and try to understand what those differences are. And sometimes they enter into marriage just expecting things to work, just expecting people to understand each other. And these differences don't have to bring issues. Actually, when you understand each other, you can embrace them and use it to be a benefit to your marriage. And also for your children as well, if you've got different cultural or social backgrounds. So we're going to get into it. First subtopic is where you're from. So I'm of Jamaican descent and my wife is Ghanaian. Why was that important or something to think about? I guess for Jamaicans that don't understand Ghanaians and vice versa, there are some slight nuances. You might just think, well, we're both black, we're exactly the same, but there's little things like we eat rice and peas, they eat jollof rice, we have fried dumpling.
No, that's not a comparison.
That's the difference.
No, I'm saying if you're gonna have two comparisons, it would be rice and peas and wache. You wouldn't compare
Okay.
jollof rice.
They eat wache, we eat rice and peas.
Yeah.
We have lemon and ginger, you have house of cocoa. But there's differences, and I think that was important because when, like, for example, when we approached our parents, they have things that, Jamaicans just think that, sometimes they can have superstitions, like Africans, they just do juju, and,
and Jamaicans will just cheat on you.
Jamaicans cheat on you, you hear that said, like, oh, he's going to leave you, he's going to cheat on you. I think that was actually said to you, wasn't it?
Probably.
Yeah, he's going to leave you, he's not going to stay with you, all this kind of stuff. And so it's just important to understand different cultures and embrace them.
And it really helps you to learn one another. When you understand where someone's coming from, when you understand their background, you understand why they behave and they react to certain things in a certain way. So for example, me coming from a Ghanaian background, I was very much, in that culture, as a woman, you stay at home until you're ready to leave the house to go and get married. You're very much protected and babied in that culture, versus the Jamaican culture where actually there's a lot of independence that's expected from you from a certain age.
And it does vary, but through some homes. But there's a lot of independence, and like the way, particularly our mum, because when I was in teenage years, it was more my mum, but also my dad as well. It was kind of like stand on your own 2 feet, don't be dependent. So if you're coming home from school, you walk home. I remember I had a 1 hour walk home for ages before I got a bike. That would never happen, like somebody would be there. Whereas sometimes in her culture, somebody would be there to pick up the kids. And like if we were going to go out with our friends after, on the weekends, at secondary school, like if you're going to plan to do that, you have to be able to afford to catch the bus there and make your own way home. And there's just these slight differences.
Even like jobs, I wasn't allowed to work.
Right. Whereas from like age of 16, I was
you had a job. Like I wasn't allowed to work until I started uni.
Yeah.
Because there was importance and focus on education.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because by the time we was ready to get married, there were some big differences for us. Like I was like, you know, if I decided I wanted to get married, I didn't really need to consult my parents. By the time I was like 20, we got married, I was 24, you were 23.
Yeah.
They were just kind of they just trusted my decision making. Like it was like, okay, this is who I want to marry. Like there's a bit of, are you sure? And I was like, okay. Whereas for her, she had to jump through loads of hoop and tell the mum, tell the dad, and tell all the family, and they all had to be on board, and and so it's just different. And also that plays out when you're having kids in terms of how you'd raise them. So in some cultures, like the kids, they'll keep them at home for ages, and she just said,
mean like in the first few weeks of their birth.
No, I mean like when you grow up and they're going adults, like
how long they stay at home.
How long they stay at home for? Whereas kind of our culture is like by the time you're a certain age, clear off. Like I want my own space, and so it's just different. Yeah. Also connected to that was we like our marital background. So we both came from what you would call quote unquote broken homes. My parents divorced when I was age 7.
I think mine was when I was like 9.
But even within that, they were very different. So like my divorce, I grew up in a place called Watford, Hertfordshire. Like the whole of Watford knew about it. It was very acrimonious, very painful. And that really marked and shaped who I was for a lot of my young years. It actually affected me very negatively because although my parents weren't rich or well off, they put all the money they had together and sent me to like a private school when I was in primary school. And I had a really good education. I remember back when John Major was Prime Minister, like they wrote to my parents and said like, your son's really intelligent and all this stuff. So things was going well at primary school. But when my parents divorced, it really affected me at secondary school. I got suspended 8 times from school. I became troubled, started attention seeking, had rejection issues. And so it really shaped me. But despite the fact that we both came from divorced parent backgrounds, hers was less acrimonious. Her parents still spoke to each other. And so it was just different. It's strange to me to see that.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the norm, if I'm honest. But yeah, my parents very much talked to each other. When my mum sold the flat that we lived in when we grew up, my dad got some money and we got some money. Their relationship was a lot different. But another similarity is the fact that my dad wasn't around much when I was younger. So like you, I also had attachment issues. I also had rejection issues that I thank God that I've overcome.
Through Christ.
Yeah, thank God for the ability to overcome those. But yeah, I think there were a lot of similarities where we've had divorced parents, but the way in which we were shaped is very different.
It's very different, and the rejection that can come from a divorced parent background is huge. I remember for like my 23rd birthday, Steph took me on the London Eye, and it's a very strange experience for her. Like, I remember I had some deep-rooted suppressed emotions all come from my parents' divorce, and rejection as in like what happens when your parents divorce, so they split up, is you normally see one parent every other weekend. I remember times where I'm just waiting by the window, waiting for my dad to come. And by the way, my dad is a fantastic dad, a very loving dad. But sometimes he was busy, sometimes he forgot. And that pain of you're waiting there for your dad to come and he didn't turn up, and that deep-rooted stuff. And I remember just growing up thinking, I would never find somebody that would love me, for me. And she did something very simple, like take me on the London Eye for my birthday. And for literally about an hour and a half, I just broke down crying. And we just stood there and she didn't really know what to do. And stood there on the spot, just crying my eyes up. And what happened was, I had felt that I was loved for who I was. I was just loved just because. And it just released something that was deep-rooted that maybe I thought I'll never be able to experience that emotion, And so there's just a lot of things that, as you said, for me, it was more is rejection. I guess for her, growing up in a divorced parent home, it was not really seeing a man be a man. And when you grow up and it's a woman leading a home, it's quite different. And so that when you have, I wouldn't say that I was or am authoritative, but more just being a man of God. leading your family in prayers and making decisions. And you're not used to that. Even certain of our family members, that was hard to, who's this guy, and why is he making all the decisions?
Yeah, it's a strange concept when you come from a broken family, and as we said, particularly in the UK, women are the ones that will keep the children. So very many of people that come from broken homes will be in homes where women are leading. So you literally have that mindset that women must lead, that you must have your own stuff to the side, that you must be able to lead yourself, or you shouldn't have to take direction from a man, you shouldn't have to take advice from a man, you should be able to live how you want to live.
It's like that whole Destiny's Child for independent woman, and all these things feed into society and feed into our psyche and feed into this great feminism movement, all this stuff. Actually, it goes completely against God's word. Submit ye one to another. And actually, you should, when you talk about submission, there's two words there. There's sub and mission. Sub means under. So when you submit, as the man, you've got to give your wife a mission, a project, or something to come under. And ultimately, over years and period of broken homes and people doing this in the wrong way, not doing things God's way, people have not had anything to follow. And so as well. And there's lots of things to think about, not to dwell on the point, but sometimes, particularly ladies, they can't receive. When they meet somebody and they're going to marry somebody, because of the brokenness in them and, this kind of what they built up men to be, people who let them down, people who cheat on them, people who do this, then they meet somebody who's of God, somebody that God's brought into their life, a good thing. They can't even receive gifts. They can't receive being blessed. And so, this is...
I was going to say, I was watching, I think it was on maybe like YouTube or something, and it was an actor. She was just saying how in her home everything's 50-50. She has her money, her husband has his money, and everything that they pay for in the house, whatever they need in the house, they split 50-50, even though one person's worth so much more than the other. And I think having that kind of mindset really stops you from being able to walk in your role as a wife, and it prevents your husband from walking in his role as a husband. If you take away that I'll do my own 50-50 independent woman, if you have that stance, you literally stop your husband from walking in his role as a husband. You literally stop him from leading. You literally stop him from and you muzzle him, you muzzle the ox, and even you feel frustrated because you can't be the woman and the wife that God's created you to be. And
as the nature of a man is a giver. Without going into details, the nature of a man, everything is, he's a giver and the woman is a receiver. You give a woman a house, she'll turn it into a home. You bring her home some groceries, and I'm not just, you could say stuff is old fashioned, but generally, you give a woman a seed, she'll give you a baby. A woman is a receiver, man. That's how God has made us.
She nurtures and incubates.
Right, and so you have to be able to receive. And so it's important when you're dating to identify if you're not healed from some certain things, or that when you go into marriage, you can present to your spouse to be the best possible version of you. Or if you are married, that you can work on these things and identify them. Because a lot of the body of Christ is in a state of needing healing, but not actually being healed. Jesus came to heal the brokenhearted, and so it's important that we are healed and not broke. Because two broken people don't make a whole. You hear people say stuff like, she completes me, or they complete me. The only one that completes you is God.
Amen.
The only one that can fill you is God. The only one that can satisfy you is God. And ultimately he will use people to do that, but it's God. That there's some places that only God can touch. And so what else do we want to talk about in terms of social and cultural differences?
So our backgrounds, and we kind of explained this already, but I came from a Christian home. I say we had Christian values, but my parents weren't born again. So whilst we did things because we thought that they were right, we didn't live a born again, sanctified life. And that wasn't fostered in my home. So we would go to church every Sunday, we prayed before we ate, we did all of the religious acts, which I'm grateful for because it gave us values that we later were able to build on. But we certainly didn't come from a born again home, and I think for you it was probably the opposite, where neither of your parents were Christians.
Yeah, neither of them were saved. And my dad grew up in Jamaica. you know, got forced to go to church when he was younger. So the moment when he moved here, age 17, you know, I think it was just after the Windrush generation. But when he moved here, age 17, it was like clubbing, enjoying yourself, rebellion kind of thing. I'm free. And my dad he did well when he came here. You know, he took up martial arts and became an international champion, and he did well with his life. But Christ was not the center of his life. He didn't take us to church. And my mum, although she grew up as a Roman Catholic, she didn't. She would say, if you asked her, she would say, "I'm non-practicing." So Christ was not the center of our home. So for me, the emphasis, what we always used to hear is, "Oh, because you're black, you have to work twice as hard," and you know, all this kind of stuff. But I would say like education was the God, or getting a good job was the God, or money was the focus. It wasn't, you need to be godly. And so I remember when I got saved, age 19, and I was at uni, and I came home and I was like, yo, we don't pray before we eat and all this stuff. And I was bringing Christian concepts to a parent, i.e. my mother, who was unsaved, and she was like, well, why are you trying to ruffle our way of living? This is not how we live. And so this is important when you enter into marriage, because I think for us, we're probably more similar, although, but for sometimes you have people who come from a deep Christian home. You know, the parents are both in ministry, parents may be elders or deacons or have intercessors, and just, they have that God history. And so in your home, you've grown up with Christ in the home, and there's some things that are given, like having altar every day and praying together as a family, seeking the face of God. Whereas for the one who hasn't come from a Christian home, it's like, what is this? This is alien. You can almost feel, I remember like when we first got married, and I used to play our pastor Glenn, our bishop, was preaching in every room, because although I didn't grow up in a Christian home, by the time we got married, I'd been saved about 5 years. I was just different because I wasn't forced to go to church. So that was never impressed. So when you get saved at age 19 and you make a decision to stop clubbing and stop drinking, then it's because you're an adult, and it's because you want God. And so by the time we're married, this militant young man playing a preacher in every room, and she just thought it was too much.
Because of the background that I came from, it was forced upon me to do certain things. And so when you come out of that environment, you come to an environment that you're shaping yourself with your husband, you want, you think you're stepping into freedom. You're shaping your own world. But then actually, you've got a man that you've got to submit to. Who's now telling you there's certain things that we need to work on that aren't right.
And so it's just the background you come from is important. Like our pastor, sometimes him and his wife have shared that although they both were Christians, he came from a quote unquote perfect home with a mother and father, a woman of God, whereas our first lady, Bishop's wife, she also came from a Christian home, but maybe the marriage wasn't as strong and she didn't see those examples in the home. And so I remember both of them have told us for the first 5 years that it was rocky. There were times she found it difficult to submit, or she would just go out and do her own thing. And that's important to think about, I remember I know that Stephanie is the wife for me. I know she's the person that God has created for me. But my parents may have had somebody else in mind, or your parents, if you're young and you're listening to this, may have somebody else in mind for you. And so you've got to know that if God is leading you, if God has brought you together, what God has put together, no man could put asunder. That is true. But you've also not to be naive of the fact that these social and cultural differences can actually make things difficult at the beginning. And I remember my pastor used to say to me, and I think it's true, it takes about 5 years where you're finding your feet, and then eventually you just lock in. And it gets easier after a certain period, but it takes a while, and it's just important to give yourself that time and that space, particularly if you come from different cultural backgrounds. Two of you may be Nigerian, but they are different different tribes, or Yoruba, Igbo, you may and not everything's the same. And so, as we mentioned, Ghanaian, Jamaican, they're just things that we have to think about. So.
And it's also things that we then need to then consider when we have children, and that's for another day. But the next is kind of ministry and how our backgrounds have influenced how we see ministry. So I was always in ministry from young. I used to go to the Salvation Army, so I used to play my pom 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 pom.
What's pom 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 pom?
It's a cornet.
Oh, okay.
It's the smaller trumpets. It's a smaller one.
We're from England, so we just need to.
They need demonstration as well, the English.
Okay.
So yeah, I used to play that, and we used to be in the timbrel. So do my little timbrel routine, and then when we left Salvation Army, went to another church. I used to be in the worship team. So I've always been in ministry, and I'm still in ministry, and I believe it's where the Lord wants me to be, and I'll continue to be there.
And yeah, the same for me, actually. From when I got saved, after about a year and a half, kind of finding my feet in God, then was serving in the youth teams, young men's teams, evangelism, prayer, got involved in ushering, got involved in everything. And why is that important? Because I guess when you first get married, like there is a scripture in the Bible in Deuteronomy, which I believe is true. It says, if a man's supposed to get married, before he goes to war, he should take 1 year and spend it with his wife. The principle is, like you might say, well, I'm not going to war, I'm not in the army, I'm not a soldier, but the fact that you're a Christian means you're on the battlefield. When you serve in ministry, it means you're on the battlefield. And so the principle is that when you get married, you should take some time, just enjoy one another, spend that time together. Some people, they're straight into ministry. I think we took about 6 months maybe before we got involved.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a year, but we didn't quite get there.
Well, me it was 6 months, maybe it was like 9-10 months.
Yeah.
But the principle is don't rush into these things. Give yourself that time to grow as a couple. But also, why is that important consideration to think about before you get married? Is that if one of you is used to always spending all of your evenings and all your time at church, and the other one's not, that can bring contention.
Yeah.
Because you get into marriage, you're expecting to spend time together, and you haven't defined like there's these 2 or 3 evenings where we're just going to sit on the couch and chill, or we're going to do an activity together. Then one is always out doing church stuff, and the other one, you didn't discuss that. That can bring resentment. It can bring resentment towards God, towards the church. And you know, we hear this. I heard this a lot. I haven't heard it for a while, but I was kind of told it's God first, then your family, and then your ministry, then the church, your marriage and the church. And there's a scripture in Timothy, and it plagued me. 1 Timothy, before I got married, I used to read it over and over again. It never left me. It says that, how can a man rule in the church of God if he cannot take care of his own home? And someone that does that is worse than an infidel. The principle, the thought there is that before you go and do all this church stuff and appear to be this great man or woman of God, make sure that your home, make sure that what you're doing flows out of the strength of what's going on in your home, and not rather you're trying to take care of the church and your home is in tatters. You know, when we come to church on a Sunday, should we be based out of the overflow of what's happening during the week? And one of the reasons why people can't worship or don't praise God the way they should is because there is no overflow. What's happening in the home is mess and it's chaos, and there is no worship. By the time they get to there's nothing to give, you're waiting for somebody to stir you up. So I don't know if you want to add anything on that.
No, completely true. I think, especially when it comes to ministry, you can't minister from a place of emptiness. And this is not stuff that we should be doing because somebody's asked us to join a ministry. This is stuff that you need to be called to do. So it's important that there is an overflow, like you said. Yeah,
and so just talk about these things before you get into this thing called marriage.
Yeah.
Traditions. Yeah. Smiling.
So I'm smiling because I always say this, like, and I think you've said it as well, so I feel no way to say it, that Jamaicans don't have any kind of culture, tradition, like, there's nothing there. So it's very much, or particularly in our marriage, it's very much
reggae music. That's a tradition.
But you don't listen to that, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So it's the Ghanaian culture then that dominates because there is a culture there. And when I say culture, I mean in terms of not just the food and the music, also you know, the way in which we deal with things when it comes to weddings, funerals, births, all that stuff.
There's 2 weddings.
Pardon?
There's 2 weddings.
2 weddings.
Traditional.
Yeah, exactly, the traditional wedding. And so for you coming into that environment, I guess tell them what's it like coming from.
Yeah, that was hard for me because when we got married 2014, 2nd of August, but then we did a traditional wedding the week before.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me because there's lots of things like, oh, Levi, you need to pay a dowry. I was given a list of things I need to buy. And actually, Steph's dad, because we had established a good relationship, he was not trying to make things hard for me. He was really like, we don't need to put this weight on you, but we're going to honour the culture a bit. And I think what I found hard is I remember I just think, historically I've been a very rigid, to some extent still am, very rigid kind of strict guy, and British, and I felt it's like wearing the traditional clothing. I remember at some point I was like, I'm not wearing these clothes, and it's not me.
And then you went to T and Abs's wedding.
Oh yeah, we went to our friend Paul and Abigail, their wedding. He's a Jamaican man and Nigerian, and he just embraced it. And that, just seeing my friends embrace it made me more comfortable. And actually, it's something like if we go to church now, I would rather wear the kind of like the Ghanaian style clothing rather than a suit, actually. And sometimes it just takes seeing somebody else. It just takes somebody, to allow you to step into what you're supposed to. And just seeing my friend just be free and just, kind of embrace his wife's culture, and he still does now. And so that was a big help for me. But yeah, it was difficult at the time. Yeah, just because it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And at some stages, some stuff was being forced on me, and I didn't receive it well. So.
Yeah. But all in all, we had an amazing traditional wedding.
We had a great traditional wedding,
and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I think what I loved most is that your parents, particularly your dad, loved it.
Yeah.
And it was a glimpse for them to see what the culture is like. So sometimes we do things not just for us, but for our families.
Yeah. So just something to think about when you get, because some people say they're going to get married, but there's all these extra things that you
have to agree on it. I think you must have that same mindset. You must both come into agreement. Okay, well, how are we going to do this? What's it going to look like? What am I willing to bend on? What am I not? What's an absolute no? If you establish these things, then it shouldn't cause friction.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we used to have a concept which we don't talk about so much, is like, is it a must?
Yeah.
And if something's not a must, like, you have to define that. Everything can't be a must.
No.
But there's some things that's really important to the two of you.
And something that someone that we really respect has said to us is to prefer one another. And it's such a beautiful concept. If you prefer your future spouse over yourself, then you're always going to have peace in your home, because you're always trying to please the other person.
Peace over justice.
Peace over justice.
Because when I win all the time,
I lose.
That means she loses. And if she wins all the time, then I lose. But when you prefer one another, then actually you have an environment where both of you are winning regularly, and you also are able to meet in the middle, what's called compromise, which is a key word in marriage. Compromise, so important. So, education.
So, I did all the basics. So, GCSE, A-level, went to uni, did my degree in law, then did a master's, and that's where I've stopped my education.
Yeah, but pre-marriage,
temporarily.
Like, in terms of marriage.
Oh, pre-marriage.
In terms of,
Okay, so pre-marriage, we got married. So we got married in 2014. I had just finished uni. So, and I guess the importance of education in that time as well is your expectations from one another, and also for the parents as well. So what your parents would have wanted from
is that
somebody.
Even important, though, what the parents
It's
want?
not important. No, I think it is actually. I think it's important because what they want subconsciously affects and shapes what we want. So if you've always been told you need to marry somebody of a certain level, then actually you're going to be looking for that person. So you wouldn't. I don't think you'd be looking for someone in Tesco's or Sainsbury's. You found me at uni.
Somebody educated. Yeah.
So whilst it wasn't a huge thing or wasn't at the forefront of your mind, actually you want a certain caliber of person.
That's true. But how important is it? Like, if the both of you have to have a first? Or,
No. Yeah. I think the nuances of it is where the difference is. I don't think it was important. It certainly wasn't important to me that the person be crazy intelligent, even though you are.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anyway, I'm sure he'll tell you his educational background, but that wasn't something that was important to me. What was important to me that he was educated, I think, because I was at uni, it was nice to meet somebody there, somebody that we could share those experiences. So, you know, we both came from the same uni. We both had different experiences at uni, but we both joined certain societies. Did you join a society?
No, I didn't join the ACS, just a Christian.
Not ACS, but just a society.
Yeah, no, I don't think I
Yeah,
did.
Christian society.
Yeah, that was
CU.
Yeah, Christian Union, yeah.
So we both had experiences at uni. Both went to each other's No, you came to my graduation. So yeah, it was important, but there was no like, he must hit these targets. Not for me anyway, and I don't think for you either.
No, I think my mum, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I failed my GCSEs.
I don't think you mentioned.
No, I didn't say no. I got suspended 8 times from school. I had a troubled, like, high school, secondary school time. Failed all my GCSEs by 1. But then I kind of had this turnaround, and things started to go really well for me. Got 3 A's at A-level, first class honours, into the House of Commons, top black student in London, had all these awards. And so I think, without saying it to me in words, my mum would have been like, yeah, I expect him to marry someone else for the first. But Steph didn't have that, and that wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for somebody who had my heart. I mentioned some of the things in a previous video about when we went on the London Eye. No, in this video, yeah, sorry. And so I think for me, it was you met and still do. There's specific needs and some things that are important to me as a wife, and it wasn't education. But why it's important in terms of getting married is because if one of you has an uneducated background and the other has masters and degrees, it can change or affect the way that you raise the kids. I remember when I was growing up, my mum was born here in England and my dad was born in Jamaica, so the way they would pronounce, like my mum would say 3 and my dad would say tree, or my mum would say cat and my dad would say kiat, you know, and there's different things were pronounced differently. And why are you laughing?
No reason.
And don't get me started on your, and things were pronounced, how do you say hospital?
We say hospital, okay.
Continue. Hospital. So the way things were pronounced, that had an impact because my mum was always correcting my dad and saying it, and you know, it wasn't intentional what he was doing, but also just in terms of the emphasis. So discussing, but as my wife said, the parents is another consideration. I don't think it's the most important, but sometimes if you're younger and you're presenting this person to your parents and say, I'm going to marry them, first they want to see how many degrees do they have behind their name and what's their credentials, and you have to really recognize and work out how important that is to you. You know, and ultimately it's your decision, and be mature enough to be able to have those conversations with your trusted ones, your loved ones, the ones that are important in your life. I know people, you're going to say something?
Yeah. No, you carry on first.
There you go. Okay. I prefer you
to. What I was going to say is that based on the education thing, if you're insecure about it, it could actually cause issues like between the two of you, because if you see yourself as underneath someone because you're not as educated, or if you view yourself as less than because you're not, you didn't get what your spouse got, then you've already introduced an inferiority complex, a feeling of not being worthy, and that will pan out in other areas of your marriage, from something that's someone could say was so trivial. In other areas, you then start feeling less than, but it all stems from this, just not feeling like you're quite up to his mark.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I think the other thing that was come to me is, as I said in our first video, that sometimes after you're dating, you've got to get to a period where, despite the so-called weaknesses or the potential issues, you're believing God for the grace to be able to have a successful marriage and handle those. And so the person you're marrying may not be educated, and you may be a superstar, flyer, entrepreneur, and you've got to recognize that some of your partner's weaknesses may hinder things down the line, or there may be some things that you can't do. Is that something you're prepared to accept? You shouldn't go into marriage just still thinking that you're going to you know, they should ultimately, it shouldn't be a hindrance. They should be a help to you.
Yeah.
But there may be some teething problems or some time period needed to kind of get over that. And I've seen that in some of our friends, you know, they will say at some point, I should be here, you know, I should have had these businesses open and I want to be up here, but I'm having to help my spouse. And you have to ask God really in prayer about this. Can I go through and can I carry these issues for a period of time? You know, I've heard there's a couple, the man's passed away. I think the lady's going to be 60 soon. But I remember they used to say that when they first got married, the guy, it wasn't education, but it was his Christian walk. She had to help him on his Christian walk, that he could be the man of God in the home. But there was a period of grace that was needed there. This thing called grace is so important when it comes to marriage. The person you marry, 3 times Paul said, this thing is too much for me to handle. But each time God said, my grace is sufficient for you. And grace is such a key component of marriage. It cannot be overemphasized. Education, but we talked about a lot of things.
Dislikes.
Likes and dislikes. Yeah, what your?
My likes. I love a good movie.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm an escapist kind of girl. Like I love to just escape in a good movie or a book, like a good, a good novel. I love to take care of my home. I love to make it look pretty. I love to take care of my girls, but specifically in the dating period, it was kind of movies, books. I wasn't like, I don't think I was big on like makeup or anything.
No.
I mean, I did enjoy it, sorry, but it was more that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's important because I wasn't a cinema person and I'm not an escapist person. So I think when we first got married, we got like these Cineworld passes monthly, you know, and it was me just doing something she liked to do.
Which was good.
And also, you know, like I used to go to the gym.
I did try.
Yeah, she did try.
I did.
it was hard.
Very, very hard.
Not that she needed to go to the gym, but it was just a hobby that I liked to do. I had health issues, and so it was something that I liked to do. But doing stuff that it's just important to understand that in terms of likes, because if you're always doing what one person wants to do and you never do things that each other, you have your own things that you do. I think that's important as well. When you get married, like everything just doesn't have to be together.
You're
you can
still
have
individual.
Like, sometimes I'll meet my friends to play badminton or go for a ride with some of the guys, but there's some things that we should understand that are important to us to do together, like have a movie night, or because the way we receive love is different. One person may receive love through quality time. One person may receive love through gifts. And we'll touch on that in one of our videos on some books that we've got to recommend. So just something to talk about in your dating, something to think about, certainly in the early stages.
Did you say what your likes?
My likes and dislikes. My likes are swimming, cycling, playing badminton. I love traveling, but I guess at the time that we got married, we didn't have the money to travel. So
now it is.
Yeah, I like traveling. But just talking about those things, because you should know where each other stands. And I think, just to end on this, it's good, even when dealing, I learned early on, somebody said to me, try not to deal with conflict or dispute when times are not good. So there are times in the early stages of our marriage where we might have had a disagreement over, I don't know, the washing up or how much we spent on something, or an area, something that could come up in the home. And one of the ways we dealt with that was we would go and play badminton together or play checkers together. And doing an activity together brought us to a place of happiness. Then we could talk about without being at each other's throats. Yeah. And so understanding the likes and dislikes and also having something that you can do together was important, just to help resolve conflicts as well. So that was our video on social and cultural differences and why that's important for dating, but also the early stages of marriage. Hope this video is a blessing to you.
Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.
Take care.
Bye.